What is up, and welcome to another edition of the Mile High Hoops podcast. As always, I am your host, Zach Bai, and as always, I appreciate you spending a sliver of your busy day with me here on the pod, reacting to All-Star Weekend and a couple other things to just forecast as we now officially barrel down the backstretch of the NBA season and hit the reset button and get to the place where we all want to get to, and that's back to the NBA playoffs. And we've talked about this through the last however long it's been in this regular season, that this has been a little bit more not challenging of a regular season, but just sort of like sometimes there can be like a malaise the year after a championship. We're discovering that, you know, it's not as, doesn't feel as relevant, is not as exciting, and we've covered this, but I think now I can feel like, okay, the destination is within our sights. And you ever took like a long trip? And like I've driven across the country. I remember driving to Denver, and oh my gosh, I could tell some stories about that trip. But it's 2017. It's 7 years ago, and 7 years ago this month actually, in our 6th year here on the podcast. But I remember I'm driving this U-Haul across the country, and I remember the first sign that I saw for Denver. Now, Denver wasn't close. It wasn't right around the corner. It was probably still, 300 miles away or whatever it was. And that's kind of how this feels, where it's not right around the corner, but like you're starting to see the signs, the exit signs that say playoffs, this way. Still 300 miles to go, but it's no longer 1,500 miles to go, the way that it was when you started the trip. So I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good about the Nuggets. They have a kind of a favorable out of the gate schedule that we're going to look at at the end. But first, just a couple thoughts from All-Star Weekend. Man, the differing of opinions on All-Star Weekend is pretty wild. The game itself, I have been one that has been kind of like almost like bizarrely sensitive of All-Star Weekend and have a tendency to like protect it, argue on its behalf. It's been under fire and criticism for a while. They've tried to switch formats, try to switch it back, from guys picking teams to back to East-West. And this was the most disappointing I have felt, and I'm not gonna die on the All-Star Hill. And I can boil it down to a sentence or a statement. The game did not reflect the actual game of basketball. It didn't even look like its second cousin. When you're talking about the over-under being 355 points and it didn't even stand a chance when the final score is 211 to 186, it just didn't resemble the game of basketball. It felt like the last 5 years of the Pro Bowl. And the last 2-3 years of the Pro Bowl on the NFL side, it got real bad. Where literally 3-4 minutes into a 60-minute football game, the guys were not tackling to the ground. And by the second quarter, it felt like a spring practice, a non-contact practice. And by the fourth quarter, it's just an embarrassment to the game. And they eventually took it away. And I think something needs to be done with this game because the game didn't get helped on Sunday night. It didn't. The perception of it didn't get hurt from a real life, like utilitarian standpoint, didn't get hurt. We're not going to be talking about the All-Star game even this time next week. But I think the brand did get hurt, and the brand of the All-Star game certainly got hurt, and I just didn't like it. It didn't feel like the game that I absolutely love and have defended for so long. But this one jumped the shark. It sucked. It was awful. You're watching Karl Anthony Towns, go out and score 50 points off the bench. It didn't feel organic at all. So I didn't like it. Something needs to be done. Problem is, I don't know how to fix it. Financially incentivize players that are on already guaranteed $100 million contracts, each of them to a man, some of them on $200 million contracts. I think Jaylen Brown's on a $300 million contract. I don't know what the recipe is. I don't. And maybe the game needs to go away for a year or two. And absence makes the heart grow fonder. Maybe guys will want to play if they're reinvigorated. But it was just a shame because the sad part about it is when you just look at some of the names on paper, I think out on the floor was probably, I think you'd maybe make an argument that's like 10 of the 25 greatest players of all time were all out there. Steph, LeBron, Jokic, Durant, Giannis, maybe 10's a little bit strong, but already 5 off rip. Is someone like Luka going to get there? I think so. Kawhi, bona fide Hall of Famer. It wasn't good. I'll leave it there. In terms of some of the interactions, I did like, seeing Jokic just having fun with some guys. You saw him and Steph Curry him and Luka set up Steph Curry to get like dunked on. And we used to do this all the time when I was younger of like trying to bait someone underneath the rim, like, yo, come here for a second, come here. And you get him and then like your buddy jumps out of nowhere and like dunks on his like neck. Used to do that in the doorway too, just like dunking on guys like in the doorway when young and just goofing off. They were having fun like that. So that was cool to see. There was an exchange between LeBron and Jokic on the bench where LeBron asked Jokic, who was at his first All-Star game back in 2005, which was in Denver, by the way. And, LeBron was messing with Jokic saying, yeah, it was me, Wilt Chamberlain, Bob Cousy, Larry Bird, and which was obviously a jab at his own self-deprecating because this is his 20th All-Star game. But he did talk about how it was Shaq, it was Kobe, it was Duncan and Iverson and, some legendary names, the same kind of names that we'll look back 20 years from now at this crop of guys. So that was cool. And then you do see the rumors and Jokic was actually asked about it of like, could Luka Doncic and Nikola Jokic eventually get on the same page and play together? And Jokic was asked about it. He said, I'm happy in Denver, love the organization, but maybe if he ever got pissed in Dallas and wants to come. And I think it's kind of funny now, but I do think we should just keep our eye on it. We should just keep our eye on it because Luka has big picture plans for himself to go down as one of the great players of all time. And at 25 years old, he's already done some incredible things. But he hasn't even come close to the levels that he wants to get to. And Jokic doesn't have a bona fide traditional 1B star next to him. The way that Shaq had Kobe, the way that Tim Duncan had sidekicks of, Hall of Famers, the way that they had in Miami with the Heatles, where your second best player is Dwayne Wade. With the way that when they revamped the Lakers and Kobe had a bona fide Hall of Famer and perennial All-Star and Pau Gasol. Like we've talked about this through the years that traditionally that a champion's second best player is typically a Hall of Famer, believe it or not. In Denver, the second best player isn't even an All-Star and is barely a top 40 scorer in the NBA. Now, we know Jamal grows into this otherworldly creature in the playoffs, but will we get far enough down the road where this makes sense for both parties? And I don't want to dig too deep into it now because I don't think it's relevant for right now or this season or next season. But I do think it's just something to just put in our back pocket, these little moments, because in the NBA, more than anything, the human connectivity matters more than any other sport by a mile. The human connectivity, the agents, they run that sport. So I know with the new setup in this new CBA, it's a little bit more restrictive compared to the transient nature of the last 20 years in the NBA. But I mean, if these guys both want it to get done at a certain point in time, it would get done. I believe that. But I don't think it feels unfair to truly dive deep into the conversation right now and what it would cost in a trade, and because the Nuggets are trying to defend a title, so it just doesn't feel it's just wrong time and place to have the big boy conversation about it. So, but I do want to keep an eye on it for down the road. So let's put it on simmer on the back burner. What else here? Dame Lillard wins the 3-point contest for a second straight year. The three-point contest for me is still a fun watch. It feels like the home run derby of basketball, where it's a little bit monotonous. If you're not like a basketball guy, it can become maybe a little bit boring because it's just so repetitive. But I just think it's an incredible display of shot making, which the shot making right now in today's NBA is the highest that we've ever seen in the game of basketball. So I love seeing that on display. And then I really did enjoy, and so did my family. My wife really got a kick out of seeing a Sabrina Ionescu against Steph Curry in the WNBA versus NBA three-point competition. Like Ionescu's final, or her score rather, was the same as Damian Lillard's winning score. Like, she is her. And I thought it was a fun collaboration growing the women's game. And it crossed my mind that Kobe would have been proud of that moment. Kobe Bryant had a unique, real relationship with Sabrina. And if you just type in those two names to Google, you'll see multiple different instances of them together. And as he was showing his girls who you can be if you pour your life into this. And I did think of Kobe on Saturday night, and I did want to just say that. Dunk contest feels broke. It's been broke outside of a one-off here and there every 5 or 6 years, like Levine versus Gordon. Like, this is the way that it's been. I don't know the solution to it. I don't. I feel like it's set up to fail. The guy who's won it 2 years in a row doesn't play in the NBA. Like, how does that make sense? How does that make sense? I know the stars don't participate in the dunk contest anymore. That sucks. That damages it in a real way. But what also I think damages it, another layer of it, is like I'm watching Lil Toppin, Obi's younger brother, jump through the air, throw it between the legs, and do a 180 and dunk it with two hands, and he gets an 8. It's like, that's nice. It's evolved to such a place where it's like we're not satisfied by what we see. So not only do the stars not participate in it, I'm watching stuff. It'd be like debuting Sega today or Super Nintendo. If you saw some of the dunks that would get 10s in 1991, 1992. But the contest has evolved to such a degree that you need to do something you've never, ever seen. And even when we saw that from Mac McClung, it got an 8 by some of the judges. I don't know. I'm at a loss. I have no idea how to fix the dunk contest. And I'm becoming like apathetic towards it. Like, whatever. It's a dunk contest. People are going to argue on twitter.com about it. It's the way it goes. Okay. I want to look ahead real briefly. On Friday's radio show, Friday's radio show, The Drive, which you can find on denversports.com or wherever you get your podcasts. We did some grades because it was at the All-Star break for individual guys. If you want to hear that, just hit up the podcast. We did it in kind of longer form than we're going to do it here. I'll just say this. Nuggets are 36-19 at the All-Star break. We know it's not the true halfway point. If they had won 2 more games, they're like in the number 1 seed, or no, I guess they're 3 games back now. But had they won like 3 more games, had they not, blown a 19-point lead to the Magic, or who'd they just blow a huge lead to? It was Sacramento, right? They were up like 16 points. They blew it. Had they just won a couple of those games, they're like in the 1 or 2 seed. I don't want to overreact. Give the Nuggets a B+. Just feels a little bit weird giving the reigning champions a grade of an A when they're not a top 3 seed. But they're right where they're supposed to be. They're one of the best home teams in the entire NBA at 21-5. Kind of like the Avalanche actually on the NHL front. And I think they're fine. There's little nitpicky things that prevent them from being an A. The up and down nature of Jamal, the more down than up nature of Michael Porter Jr. They're just not quite the same without Bruce Brown. The bench has been poor, so it doesn't feel right giving them any sort of an A grade. But I give them a B+. I give them a B+ in a grade that's less relevant than ever after a grade at an All-Star break after a championship. So let's take a brief look. We're going to get out of here. Let's take a brief look at the remaining schedule. Not the remaining schedule, but at least the first handful of games coming out of the All-Star break. You start with Washington at home. What a perfect spot, right? What a perfect spot. Not quite a get-right game, but the Nuggets had lost 3 in a row ahead of the All-Star break. So if you want to call it a get-right game, let's call it a get-right game. And you travel to Portland, to Golden State on ESPN. That's at 5 o'clock locally on Sunday. That'll be fun. And then Wednesday against Sacramento, I'll be at that game. and then Miami at LA, and then home against Phoenix, Boston, Utah, Toronto. So home games here right out of the gate in the first 2 weeks: Washington, Sacramento, Miami, Phoenix, Boston, Utah, Toronto. I mean, that's 7 home games right there in the first in the first 10 games. So couldn't have wrote it up better, and an opportunity to, like Michael Malone talked about, hit the ground running out of the break, the inverse of how you went into the break. All right, we're going to leave it there for now, guys. Thank you for hanging out with me for a couple minutes. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to rate, subscribe, please. I'm asking, right? Leave a comment. Turn on notifications so you never miss a video. If you're watching or listening to this on Spotify, leave us a 5-star review if you think that we deserve one, and tell a friend about this podcast. Haven't mentioned that in a while, but this is year 6. It's grown immensely over the years, and there's still so much room for growth, and the best way to do that is a grassroots approach by word of mouth. Appreciate you so much for being here. So long. Whatever happens, well, nothing's going to happen. We're going to come back Thursday and look ahead to the things that we're looking for in the back stretch of this NBA season and set the table for the game against the Wizards in their first game out of the All-Star break. All right, guys, we will talk to you on Thursday back here on the Mile High